morning, guys. Okay, so today in Libertango we are going through measures 34 to 50. Go ahead and check for your timestamp in the description box and we'll get started. Okay, first violins. So we get a brand new melody here at 34. This is the first time we're hearing it and you guys have got it. So let's talk about fingering first. I would really prefer this first little phrase to be in third position. So starting pick up to 34, go up into third position. It'll be 2, 3 touches your 2, 4. B flat will be a low 2 on the E string. 1 for the A. Now we're in measure 35. 4, 1, 2, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3. You can do this in first position, but you'll get some open E's. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but if you can manage to get into third, that would be great. Whether or not you did that in third, I think pickups to 38 would be best done back in first position, and you can stay in first position for the rest of the excerpt. So in 38, you've got a low 2 F natural at the end of the measure on those 16th notes, then a low 4 for the A flat, then an F sharp high 2. Pick up to that measure starts low 2, high 2. Moving on, pickups to 42, open D for the first D, and then for the D sharp low 1. The A in the next measure, measure 42, can be open, but do play the E's with a 4. Again, in measure 43, those A's can be open. And then moving ahead to 45, those last two 16th notes, you're going to have an E natural, and then a low 1 for E flat. Open D and A in the next measures are fine. Make sure you catch the G sharp, the last note of measure 47, and then in 48 that A whole note definitely do as a fourth finger, and then in 49 all of those E's should be with a fourth finger as well. There's no articulation indicated for these separate eighth notes, so I'd like you to do a détaché right in between a staccato and a legato. There's a gentle separation, but it's not a harsh stop on the string. And then for dynamics, of course, your forte for this whole thing because you do have the melody. Before I play through this, I want to point out some of these rhythms. So you've got a lot of 16th notes through here. So starting at pick up to 34, you've been playing 1, 2, 3, rest on 4, and then it's and a 1, hold, 3, off, and a 1, and 2, and 3, and 1. Just pick up to 34, 3, and 4. 2, 3, lift, 2, 3, 4. There is a down bow marked on that B flat, that last bow of measure 34. So the lift is implied, but I'm going to go ahead and mark it in anyway, a bow lift above the 8th rest there. In 37 you won't have a bow lift. You will have one in 38, so I'm going to add the bow lift over the 8th rest in 38. You won't have one in 41, and you won't have one in 45, so that takes care of that. And that rhythm with the 16th notes is the same for the next few patterns. So once you've got that counting down, you should be fine. Note that the last measure, measure 49, you have decrescendoed on the whole note down to mezzo piano, and then you're going to do a big crescendo back up to forte, and the first two notes of that measure are up, up. And let's go ahead and take those notes off the string for that entire measure. That's all the things that I wanted to point out. I'm going to set my metronome at quarter note equals 130 and play through this section. 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3, 4. Those 16th notes do go by pretty fast, so I would definitely recommend starting slow and clicking the metronome up gradually. One thing I noticed while I was practicing is that it's definitely easier to both do the bowings and keep up the détaché if you're in the middle to lower half of the bow for all of this. Okay, happy practicing, and I will see you back here tomorrow for the next section. Okay, second violins. So here at measure 34, you guys are playing in octave, an octave lower than the first violin on this new melody theme that we have here. There's kind of a lot going on. First, I'm going to talk about fingering. I think you can play all of this in first position unless you prefer to go to third, but if you're going to do it in first, starting at the pickup to 34, that last 16th note can be an open A, and then you'll have a low one for B flat. In 35, you can play for that A second note with a fourth finger. You've got a low 2 for F sharp, open D is fine. That brings us to 38. You'll have a low 4 for the A flat, and then a low 2 for the F natural again. 39, low 4 for the A flat, high 2 for the F sharp. So this little part right here, you've got a pickup to measure 39 is a low 2, and then 39 itself is a high 2. Moving ahead to 41, that dotted half note, D, definitely use a fourth finger for that. And then skipping ahead to 44, low 1 for D sharp, and that tie means that that accidental D sharp will last all the way through the next measure as well. 46, I'm okay with this being open D, but if you feel better using the fourth finger or shifting up, that's perfectly fine, and that takes care of all of the fingering. Let's talk about articulation briefly. There isn't an indication of how these separate eighth notes should be played except for the very last measure. That last measure, measure 49, we are going to take off the string. So it's up, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, and we're going to bounce that through the crescendo as well. All of the other separate eighth notes in this section, though, I think we're just going to do a détaché. So if you remember, détaché is about halfway between legato and staccato. So there is a break in between, a gentle separation between each bow stroke, but it's not harsh and on the string, sticky like staccato would be. In 42 and 43 and also 46 and 47, you've got some accents within this repeated eighth note pattern. So you're accenting 1 and 2 and the end of 2, 3 and 4, beat 4 and. So it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So that's going to sound like this. Another instance where you might want to write in the counting and circle the ones with accents, that's what I did, or just do it slowly until you can get the pattern of accents. And then finally, I want to talk about these rhythms with the 16th notes. So starting at pick up to 34, you're subdividing 16th notes, so it would be 1 E and a, 2 E and a, etc. So you're playing 1, 2, 3, and 4, and a 1, hold, 2, 3, 4, and a 1, and 2, and 3, E, and 4, and 1. That tie there is tying the and of 3 to beat 4. So it might be easier if I just demonstrate it. I'm going to go slowly pick up to 34, so 3 and 4. 2, 3, 4. One thing I forgot to mention is you're going to want to add a bow lift on the 8th rest in measure 34 and also in 38. It's implied because there's a down bow written on the next note, but they don't actually give you the little apostrophe for the bow lift, and it always helps me to actually write that in. So bow lift over the 8th rest in measure 34 and 38. And then the last thing that I wanted to go over is just the low 2, high 2 situation in the end of 38 and then 39. So in 38, you've got a low 4 for A flat, lift, low 2 for F, high 2. So in tempo that would be. So that pretty much covers all of the tricky parts. I definitely would play this through a few times slowly before you try to get it up to tempo. For right now, I'm going to go ahead and set my metronome at quarter note equals 130 and play through this whole section. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4. I didn't realize until I just played through it, is in measure 38, 39, 40, that is a double up. So you've got up for the G and then another up for that E quarter note. So just watch out for that. Okay, that about does it. So happy practicing, and I'll see you back here tomorrow for the next section. Okay, violas. So here at 34, you guys pick up this kind of tango rhythm that the basses have been doing for most of this piece pizzicato. So it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Ba, ba, ba. Be careful about the bowing here. They do give you that up bow on the last note of the measure, but it constitutes an actual double up. So it's down, up, up, down. So that measure 34. And then that shows up again in measure 38 with a G sharp. Make sure you're counting and subdividing your eighth notes. Just a few notes on fingering. Last note of 34, use a fourth finger for the D. You can use open in the next few measures. 40, that D should also be a fourth finger. And then just be careful, the last note of that measure is a C natural, just a regular 3, whereas you've been playing C sharp for a few measures before that. And that's really all of the fingering things. Articulation-wise in this section, as usual, when you're changing bows off of the beat with any sort of syncopation like you are in 34 and in 38, you want to put a little extra sting on the beginning of the bow change and a little space in between the bow changes so that it comes across as intentional and not just like you're behind or ahead of the beat. There's no indication about articulation on these separate quarter notes or separate eighth notes, so we're going to go with détaché, which basically just is halfway between legato and staccato. So there's a gentle separation between the bow strokes, not a harsh stop on the string, just like staccato would be. However, on this very last measure, measure 49, with those dots, we are going to take that off the string and play it as a true spiccato. And last but not least, as far as articulation goes, here at 42 and also at 46, you've got accents on beat 1, and then the and of 2, and then beat 4. So it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And then last but not least, I'll just mention dynamics. You're forte through most of this, except for at the very end in measure 48, de crescendo to mezzo piano, just let that whole note die away. And then on those spiccato eighth notes, you're going to crescendo all the way back up to forte at measure 50. Okay, I think that covers everything, so I'm going to go ahead and set my metronome at quarter note equals 130 and play through this section. 3, 4. And that's it. One rhythm that I didn't go over would be 44 and 45. So you've got a tie from the and of beat 2 through beat 3. So it's 1, 2, and 4, 1, 2, and 4. I think if you listen to it and just count through it, you'll be fine. Okay, that does it. Happy practicing, and I'll see you back here tomorrow for the next section. Okay, cellos. So you guys are playing with the violas mostly here on this part. You start out with this kind of tango rhythm that the basses have been playing throughout most of this pizzicato. So it's 1 and 2 and 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3, 4. So down, up, and then another up. And that bowing happens in measure 34, 38, and then kind of in measure 40. Just watch for those double ups that are marked there. Let's talk about the fingering for the beginning of this. Certainly it could all be done in first position, but I'd really like to try to avoid some of these whole and half note A's being played open. So what I would recommend is, starting at 34 with my pretend cello, you would play the E first finger, just in first position. Then on the G, shift to 1, so this is your fourth finger tape, put your 1 on your fourth finger tape. Then your B flat would be a fourth finger right there. And then your 3 right behind it for A for that whole note. So 34 would be E, G, B flat, A, hold for 4. Then you've got a measure of rest. During that measure of rest, I would recommend shifting so that your second finger is on G, replacing your third with your fourth finger for A, and playing A. So now we're on 37. So you would play A with a 4 for the half note, F with a 1, F, G, A flat with a 3, and then F with a 1. Measure 40, G with a 2, shifting down for a 1 on E in first position, and now you can either play the rest of this in first. I'm okay with that next A being open if you want, or you could shift back up with your third finger on A and play it there, A, G sharp, and then you could either play your B here or shift back to first position there. Either way is fine. Here's what that fingering looks like. I just want to point out a couple of other articulation things. 42, 43, and then also a few measures later, you've got these repeated eighth notes with accents throughout them. So you're going to be accenting beat 1, and then the and of 2, and then beat 4. So it's 1 and 2 and 4. 1 and 4. So for instance, measure 42 would sound like this, and so just make sure you're subdividing and placing those accents where they go. It might be a scenario where you would want to write in the counting and circle the counts that have the accent. And other than that, just make sure you're catching all of these accidentals. B flat like we talked about in 34, and A flat a few measures later. G sharp right before 42, again we talked about that, and then you've got an F sharp accidental at 44. That accidental at 44 will last through 45 because it's tied, so the accidental is good for the whole tie. 7, you've got another G sharp, and that's all the accidentals in this section. Okay, other than that, just make sure that you're playing forte all the way through 49, and then dropping down to mezzo piano and crescendoing through measure 50 where the main theme comes back. Okay, I'm going to set my metronome at quarter note equals 130 and play through this section. 2, 3, 4. Okay, since you guys don't have the main melody, this part is a little odd sounding, so you'll want to make sure that you're really listening to my example and making sure that you're not miscounting or playing any of these accidentals weirdly, just because it's not necessarily as melodic as certainly what you had at the beginning. Okay, that's it. Happy practicing, and I'll see you back here tomorrow for the next part. Okay, basses. So pizzicato tango rhythm is still going on, so I'm just going to point out some of these accidentals and note changes that you might want to watch out for. Here at 34, you're on B flat. At 38, you go to A flat. A flat's the same as G sharp, so you would play that 4 on the E string. Then you go back to normal at 42, you've got a natural 44 F sharp accidental, and then a couple of measures later in 46 it goes to F natural, so watch out for that. Again, F natural I would play with a 1, and then I would just stay in half position for that C with a 4 and then B with a 2. And then lo and behold, in 48 and 49 you actually get something different. Not difficult, but at least it's different. The only other thing I'll point out is you're playing forte for this whole section, and then at the very last measure 49 you drop down to mezzo piano and crescendo through that scale down into measure 50. Okay, that's it. I'm going to set my metronome at quarter note equals 130 and play through. 2, 3, 4. Okay, and that's it. Happy practicing, and I'll see you back here tomorrow for the next section.